Welcome to episode 201 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It's May 20, 1993. Stade non-Gazer, Valenciennes against Olympique de Marseille. Marseille win 1-0 through Alain Boksic and secure what looks like their fifth consecutive French league title. Then, almost immediately, police enter the Marseille dressing room, because this is not just a title-clinching win. It is the start of l'affaire Varhomme, the match-fixing scandal that will strip Marseille of the French championship, send Bernard Tapie toward prison, relegate one of Europe's strongest clubs, and forever stain the team that 6 days later will win the Champions League. This is Marseille's most glorious week, and its most shameful. But how did we get here? We start with Olympique de Marseille. Marseille is not just a football club, it's a port city identity, Mediterranean, working class, noisy, proud, suspicious of Paris, emotionally extreme. The club had won titles before, especially in the early 1970s, but by the mid-1980s, it was far from the power it would become. Then Bernard Tapie arrived. Tapie was a businessman, politician, showman, and risk-taker. He built a reputation buying struggling companies, turning them around, selling the story as much as the product. He had sporting success in cycling with La Vie Claire. He bought Adidas. He moved in politics, and in 1986, he took over French football had not really seen anything like him. Tapie wanted stars, trophies, and European recognition. He brought in players and coaches at a speed that made Marseille look less like a club and more like a project to conquer time. Jean-Pierre Papin, Chris Waddle, Enzo Francescoli, Klaus Allofs, Carlos Muser, Abedi Pelé, Didier Deschamps, Basile Boli, Marcel Desailly, Rudi Völler, Fabien Barthez, Alain Boksic, and Raymond Goethals on the bench. Domestically, Olympique Marseille dominated. French champion in 1989, again in 90, again in 91, and again in 92. But Europe kept hurting them. In 1990, Benfica eliminated them in the European Cup semi-final with Vata's infamous handball goal. In 91, Marseille reached the final and lost to Red Star Belgrade on penalties. And that defeat matters deeply to this story, because Marseille went into that final with players missing and players not fully right. Tapie did not want to experience that again. Meanwhile, the European Cup itself was changing. Barcelona won the last European Cup in 1992. Then UEFA rebranded and reshaped the competition into the Champions League, formalizing the group stage logic and pointing the tournament toward the television money era. This was the world of Berlusconi's Milan, of commercial acceleration, of clubs beginning to understand that Europe was not just prestige, it was revenue, brand, and empire. And Marseille wanted to be the first in that world. In 1992-93, they got there. They survived the early rounds, then topped the Champions League group ahead of Rangers, CSKA Moscow, and Club Brugge. AC Milan, Berlusconi's machine, were waiting in the final in Munich. But before Munich came Valenciennes. 4 days before the Champions League final, Marseille traveled north needing to protect the league title and, more importantly, protect the legs that would face Milan. This is where the scandal begins. According to the later case, Tapie and Marseille general manager Jean-Pierre Benès used Marseille player Jean-Jacques Glassmann as the contact man. Glassmann had former Nantes teammates at Valenciennes. The targets were Christophe Robert, Jacques Glassmann, and Jorge Burruchaga. Yes, that Jorge Burruchaga, the man who scored Argentina's winning goal in the 1986 World Cup final. The request was not quite lose 10-0. It was more cynical than spectacular. Take it easy. Do not injure Marseille players. Let get through the match safely before Milan. Glassmann refused. Robert accepted. Burruchaga's role became part of the case. Money changed hands. The 250 francs later found buried in the garden of a relative of Christophe Robert. And then came the match. Valenciennes 0, Marseille 1. Boksic scored in the first half. Robert went off injured early after a challenge by Eric Dimeco. During the match, Glassmann told his coach, Boro Primorac, what had happened. He also alerted the referee, Jean-Marie Veniel. After the final whistle, the police went into the Marseille dressing room and began questioning players. Imagine that scene. A club has just won the league. The Champions League final is 6 days away, and the dressing room door opens not for champagne, not for photographers, but for investigators. So what did it mean? It created the most impossible moral split in French football history. On May 26, 1993, in Munich, Marseille beat AC Milan 1-0. Basile Boli scored with a header from Abedi Pellé's corner. Desailly, Boli, Barthez, Deschamps, Angloma, Dimeco. They fought through one of the great Milan sides. Marseille became the first French club to win the European Cup, and the whole thing was immediately contaminated. UEFA did not strip the Champions League title. The fixing case concerned a French league match, not the European final. But the shadow was unavoidable. Marseille had conquered Europe with a brilliant team, and at the same time, the club's leadership had corrupted the domestic match to protect that conquest. The punishment tore Marseille apart. The French Federation stripped of the 92-93 league title. Paris Saint-Germain, who finished second, refused to accept it. PSG also did not take the Champions League place that opened when Marseille were barred from defending their European crown. Canal Plus owned PSG and had strong commercial reasons not to inflame subscribers in Provence. So PSG stayed in the Cup Winners' Cup, and Monaco went into the Champions League. Marseille were banned from the 93-94 Champions League, the European Super Cup, and the Intercontinental Cup. Later, amid the scandal and financial crisis, they were forced down into Division 2. Bankruptcy followed, and they would not return to the top flight until 1996. Valenciennes were damaged too. They had already been heading down from Division 1, but the scandal became part of a broader collapse. The club fell, struggled financially, and later had to rebuild from a far lower place. The human stories diverged sharply. Jacques Glassmann became the conscience of the affair. He had refused to bribe, spoken up, and paid for it socially and professionally. In 1995, FIFA gave him its Fair Play Award. Christophe and Jorge Burruchaga were punished. Adeli was punished. Bernès was punished, though he later rebuilt a career as a major agent. Tapie was convicted, sentenced to prison, and became forever tied to the scandal that brought down the empire he had built. And French football had to live with the paradox. The country's first European champion was also its most tainted champion. And that is why VAR still matters. Not because football had never known corruption before. It had. Italy had Totonero in 1980, later Calciopoli in 2006. Germany would have the Häuser referee scandal in 2005. Match fixing is one of football's oldest diseases. But l'affaire VAR was different because of the timing. The new Champions League era had just begun. More money was entering the game. Television was changing incentives. Presidents were becoming celebrity power brokers. The modern game was taking shape, and immediately, one of its first great winners showed how badly power could distort competition. So before we go, 3 things to take away from May 20, 1993. First, Marseille's 1-0 win at Valenciennes was not an ordinary title clincher. It was the match that exposed l'affaire VAR. Second, the tragedy of the story is that Marseille really were a magnificent football team. Their Champions League win over Milan was tactically brave, technically elite, and historically enormous, but forever stained. And third, Jacques Glassmann's role matters. In a football culture built on dressing room loyalty, he chose competitive integrity over silence. On this day in 1993, Marseille beat Valenciennes 1-0, secured the French title on the pitch, and then watched police enter the dressing room as one of European football's most explosive corruption scandals began. That's all for episode 201 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Tomorrow, we'll go to May 21, 1904, and take you inside the meeting in Paris that founded FIFA. See you then.